The woman at the clock shop didn't even look up when Lawson Tate walked in. That was the first thing he noticed. Not the smell of machine oil and cedar wood, not the soft ticking that seemed to come from everywhere at once, not the rows of watches behind dusty glass, but the fact that she didn't look up. Everyone looked up when Lawson Tate walked into a room. He was used to the shift. The almost imperceptible straightening of spines, the small intake of breath, the eyes that said, "I know who you are." 20 years of building Tate Capital from a rented desk in Pittsburgh to a mid-Atlantic investment firm with 4 offices and a waiting list will do that. You stop expecting to go anywhere unrecognized. You stop wanting to, after a while, because anonymity starts to feel like a problem waiting to happen. But the woman behind the work table in the back of the shop, her dark hair pinned up with what appeared to be a mechanical pencil, just kept working. Both hands on a movement the size of a $50, a loop pressed against her right eye, her whole body arranged around that single small task like nothing else in the world required her attention. Lawson stood at the door for a second longer than he needed to. Then he stepped inside. The shop was on Mercer Street in Old Town Alexandria, wedged between a wine bar that hadn't opened yet and a dry cleaner with a handwritten sign in the window. It was called Wren and Time. He had almost driven past it twice before noticing the small brass placard above the door. No website, no Yelp page, just a referral from his attorney's assistant, who said her grandfather had brought his paddock here once, and left close to tears he was so pleased. Lawson had a Vacheron Constantin that had stopped working 3 months ago. He'd tried 2 other watchmakers. The first had quoted him a number so aggressive it felt like a negotiation tactic. The second had mailed it back with a note saying the complication exceeded what he was equipped to handle. He was not a man accustomed to things being beyond fixing. He cleared his throat. "Be with you in a minute," said the woman, not looking up. "Take your time," he said. She did. He waited near the door, reading the small framed certificates on the wall. Certified Master Watchmaker, AWCI. A commendation from the Smithsonian Conservation Society. A photograph of a long case clock beside a small typed card that said restored 1887, back in service 2019. After what felt like 3 full minutes, she set down her tools, removed the loop, and came to the counter. She was younger than he expected, maybe early 30s. Brown eyes, direct. A faint grease mark along the side of her left hand she hadn't bothered wiping off. "What can I help you with?" Lawson set the watch on the counter. She looked at it without touching it first. Then she leaned in, turned it over with 2 fingers, and studied the case back. "Overseas Perpetual Calendar Ultra-Thin," she said. "This is the Ref 7740. She looked up. "Where did you take it before bringing it here? How do you know I took it somewhere else?" She turned it over again. "Someone opened the case back without a proper opener. There's a small score mark, and the crown gasket's been reseated wrong. It'll hold water right up until it doesn't." She set it down gently. "So, where did you take it before bringing it here?" Lawson almost smiled. 2 places. Neither of them apparently knew what they were doing. "They knew," she said. "They just didn't want to tell you they couldn't do it." She looked at him with the same calm directness she'd given the watch. "This one's going to take me about 3 weeks. The perpetual calendar module needs to be fully serviced, and I want to test the water resistance properly before I give it back. I don't cut corners. I'm not asking you to. Some people do." She pulled out a small paper intake form. Old-fashioned, handwritten fields, carbon copy. Name? Tate Lawson Tate. She wrote it down without any change in her expression. He found himself looking at her hands again as she filled out the form. The thin scar running along the outside of her right thumb. The absence of any rings. "Is there a number where I can reach you with updates?" He gave her his cell number. She read it back to confirm, tucked the carbon copy into a small envelope with the watch, and said, "I'll call you when it's ready. If anything changes with the timeline, I'll let you know." "That's it?" She looked at him. Was there something else? There wasn't. He left. He thought about the shop for the rest of the day, which was unusual. He had a 2 o'clock board call, a 7 o'clock dinner with a fund manager visiting from London, and a stack of memos from his senior analysts that needed review before morning. He did all of it, but somewhere in the background, quiet as the ticking inside that shop, something kept running. He went back 4 days later. Not for the watch. She had been clear about the timeline. He told himself he was just walking down Mercer Street, that he'd happened to be in the neighborhood. This was not precisely true. His office was 12 blocks north, and he had taken a specific turn that added 8 minutes to his walk. The sign in the door said open. She was at the work table again when he came in, but this time she looked up. Brief, measured, "Mr. Tate. Just checking in," he said, which was a thin excuse, and they both knew it. "I told you 3 weeks. You did." A pause. She set down what she was holding, a small pocket watch with a cracked crystal. "I've opened the module. The mainspring is fatigued but still serviceable. I'm going to replace it anyway." "I'd rather be certain." "Good instinct," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Do you actually care about watchmaking, or are you just killing time?" The bluntness of it caught him off guard in a way almost nothing did anymore. He stood there for a half-second, recalibrating. "I care about things that are made carefully," he said finally. Something in her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "Okay," she said, and went back to work. He stayed for 20 minutes. He wasn't sure when he stopped being a customer standing awkwardly near the door and started being someone she was talking to, but it happened somewhere around. When she explained the difference between a lever escapement and a coaxial escapement without being asked, and he found himself asking a follow-up question, and then another. Her name was Wren Albright. The shop had been her grandmother's. She'd taken it over at 26, 4 years after finishing her training in Switzerland. She'd been offered a position at a restoration atelier in Geneva and had turned it down to come back to Alexandria instead. She didn't explain why. He didn't ask. He came back the following Tuesday, and the one after that. By the 4th visit, he stopped pretending he wasn't going out of his way to be there. By the 5th, she had started making a second cup of coffee from the small press behind the work table without him asking. Black, no sugar. She'd remembered from the first time he'd accepted one, when he'd quietly set aside the creamer she'd offered. "You notice everything," he said one afternoon, watching her work. She didn't look up. "It's the job. It's more than that." She was quiet for a moment, fitting the movement back into its case with a steadiness of hand that he had started to find almost meditative to watch. "Some things you notice because you have to," she said. "Some things you notice because you can't help it." He wasn't sure which category she put him in. He thought about it on the drive home. The truth was that Lawson had not been someone who spent much time in any one place. His life had a particular rhythm. Hotel rooms, conference tables, terminals, cars, and the parts of it that were stationary. His apartment in Georgetown, the corner office at Tate Capital, the same table at the same restaurant every Thursday night. Those things existed as anchors more than homes, places he returned to because the alternative was drift. Wren's shop was the first place in years where he had felt like sitting still. He knew why. He just hadn't said it out loud yet. He had a memory, one of the few from his childhood that didn't have a ragged edge to it, of a girl at the public library on Clement Street in San Francisco, where he'd grown up in his aunt's apartment. He had been 11. His mother had died the previous spring, and that whole year had a gray, underwater quality he'd carried around like weather. He used to go to the library after school not to read, but just because it was quiet, and no one looked at him the way people at school did, with that particular mixture of pity and discomfort that grief seems to produce in bystanders. One afternoon he had sat down at a table to work on a history project and discovered he'd forgotten his pencil. He'd sat there looking at his blank paper for longer than made sense, too tired even to go ask the librarian for one, when a pencil appeared in front of him. Just placed there, on the table, without ceremony. He'd looked up. A girl his age, dark hair, serious eyes. She hadn't said anything. She'd just nodded and gone back to her own table. He finished the project. When he looked over later, she was gone. 11-year-old Lawson had turned that small gesture over in his mind for years afterward. It was not a dramatic thing. She hadn't said anything profound. She hadn't tried to fix him. She had just seen him sitting there with a blank page and done the simplest possible thing. And somehow that had been exactly right. He had tried, a few times over the years, to explain what that moment had meant. He never quite managed it. There was no clean way to say that a borrowed pencil had been the first thing in a year that had made him feel like a person, again rather than a problem. Looking at Wren Albright across the work table, watching her fit the hands back onto a dial with a tool no wider than a thumbnail, he felt something he could not name precisely, a recognition, a resonance, a sense of something remembered from a long distance. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself that right up until the morning everything changed. It was a Thursday in October, cool and overcast, the kind of gray that sits on the Potomac like it has nowhere else to be. Lawson was halfway down Mercer Street when he heard voices, several of them, louder than the street usually warranted at 8:30 in the morning. He turned the corner and stopped. There were cameras, 2 photographers, a woman with a boom mic, a man in a jacket with a broadcast logo on the chest. They were clustered at the entrance to Ren and Time, and they were talking at each other and into phones, and generally making the kind of noise that Lawson recognized immediately, with a specific and unpleasant familiarity, as the noise of a story being assembled. Mr. Tate. One of the photographers spotted him first. Mr. Tate, can you confirm you've been coming to this shop regularly for the past 6 weeks? The others turned. Is it true you're in a relationship with the owner, Lawson Tate, CEO of Tate Capital? What are you doing at a clock repair shop in Old Town? He didn't answer. He moved forward, not running, not reacting. Because reacting was what they wanted, and 20 years of public exposure had taught him that the only thing that made these situations worse was giving them energy. The door of the shop was open. Ren was standing at the counter, very still, watching the scene outside with an expression he had not seen on her before. Not fear, something more controlled than that. Her jaw was set, and her hands were flat on the countertop, and she had the look of someone doing the rapid internal math of a situation that has just changed without warning. One of the journalists stepped inside. Ren Albright, can you comment on your relationship with? This is a private business, Ren said. Quiet, even. You're welcome to leave. Ma'am, the public interest in. I said you're welcome to leave. No louder, just final. Lawson stepped past the journalist, put himself between the counter and the door. You have 30 seconds to be off this property before I call the property manager and then my attorney. I know both their numbers from memory. It took 45 seconds, but they left. The shop went quiet. Ren hadn't moved. She was looking at him with that same measuring expression she used on movements she wasn't yet sure about. You have an attorney on speed dial, she said. I have several. A pause. They called you CEO of Tate Capital. Yes, Tate Capital, she said again, slower. The investment firm, yes. She looked at the empty doorway, then back at him. Something was closing down in her face, some warmth going behind glass. How big is Tate Capital? He told her the number. Assets under management. He watched her do the math. And you've been coming in here, she said, sitting at my counter, drinking my coffee. She stopped. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Ren. Because that's what I don't understand. Her voice didn't shake, but he could see the effort it cost her. You sat in this shop for 6 weeks and never once said who you were. You let me talk to you like you were just some guy who cared about watches. You let me. She stopped herself. You know what? Never mind. I should have known better than what? Than to think someone just walks into my shop for no reason. Her eyes were steady and very clear. What was it? Research? Curiosity? A bet? None of those things. Then what? The shop ticked around them. Somewhere in the back, a clock was marking out the seconds with the patience of something that had been doing it for 100 years. I wasn't ready for you to know, he said. Ready for me to know what, exactly? That you're wealthy? That I was Lawson Tate instead of just Lawson. He said it quietly. When I walked in the first time, you didn't look up. Do you understand how rare that is? You looked at my watch before you looked at me, and when you did look at me, you looked at me. Not at what I represented, not at what I was worth. He stopped. I didn't want to lose that. She was very still. That's not a justification, he said. I know it isn't, but it's the truth. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she picked up the small envelope from the shelf behind her, the carbon copy from his intake form, and set it on the counter. Your watch is ready, she said. I finished it yesterday. He looked at the envelope, then at her. Ren. I think you should go, she said. Not unkindly, just with the finality of someone who has decided something and intends to stay decided. He picked up the watch. He left. He went back to his office and sat at his desk for the rest of the day without opening a single file. His assistant knocked twice and he sent her away. His CFO called twice and he didn't answer. The Thursday dinner reservation came and went. He pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk, the one that held things he had carried from office to office for 20 years without ever organizing, and found what he was looking for near the back, behind a folded program from his aunt's memorial service and a photograph of his first desk. A library card, old laminated, the corners going soft with age, his name on it in the slightly smeared ink of a card catalog printer. Tate, Lawson R. Branch 14. He turned it over. On the back, in small, careful handwriting, someone had written, "In case you forget, the blank page is the best part. That's where the whole thing starts." He had never known her name. She had been at his table one moment and gone the next, and in 24 years he had held on to this small thing without ever understanding entirely why. He thought about a girl with dark hair and serious eyes who didn't make a production out of kindness, who just put a pencil down in front of a boy who had forgotten his, and then went back to her own work. He thought about a woman who fit watch movements back into their cases with the same quiet, unhurried certainty. He sat there for a long time. The next morning he was at the shop when Wren arrived to open. She stopped on the sidewalk, key in hand, and looked at him. "I didn't bring the watch," he said. "The watch is fine." "Then what are you doing here?" "There's something I need to tell you, not as a client." He paused. "Actually, there are two things. One of them is that I'm sorry, not a managed apology. I'm genuinely sorry for not being honest with you about who I was, and I understand if that changes things permanently." She waited. "The other thing," he said, and he reached into his coat pocket and brought out the library card, holding it where she could see it. Branch 14, Clement Street, October 2001. There was a kid at one of the tables who'd forgotten his pencil. Wren Albright went very still. Brown hair, serious eyes. She didn't say anything. She just put a pencil down on the table and went back to work. He watched her face. "I kept the card because you'd written on the back of it. I never knew your name." She was staring at the card with an expression he had not seen before. "That was a long time ago," she said finally, her voice careful, feeling its way. "I know, you were that kid. I was that kid." She reached out slowly and took the card from him, turned it over. Read the words in her own 11-year-old handwriting. And something in her face broke open, not dramatically, not with tears, just the way a room changes when the curtains are pulled back and the light comes in, and you realize how long you had been sitting in the dim without noticing. "My grandmother's shop was on Clement Street," she said. "I used to walk to that library after school and wait for her to close up." "I know Branch 14, he said. "I used to go there to be somewhere quiet." She held the card for another moment. Then she looked up at him. "You still should have told me who you were." "Yes," he said. "I should have. I'm still angry about it." "I know." She was quiet. A couple walked past on the sidewalk behind him. A delivery truck rumbled by 2 blocks over. The morning was just finding itself, pale gold working through the overcast. "Come inside," she said finally. Not warmly, but not coldly either. "I'll make coffee." He followed her in. She didn't say she forgave him that morning. She didn't say much of anything, and he didn't push. He sat at his usual place at the counter and watched her open up the shop with the same unhurried, methodical care she brought to everything, and he drank his coffee and didn't pretend that things were fixed. They weren't fixed. They were opened, which was different. What followed was not a montage. It was 3 months of slow, careful work, the kind of repair that can't be rushed without risking further damage. He came back. She let him. Some days were easy. Some days she would look at him with that measuring expression, and he could feel her deciding, still, whether the truth of him was better or worse than the version she had built. He thought it was worse, some days. A man with his resources and his profile and his particular talent for shaping how he was perceived. There was no clean way to frame what he had done. He had let her believe he was someone smaller than he was, because being smaller had felt safer. That was not a flattering thing to know about yourself. He said this to her, one evening in December, sitting on the floor of the back workshop while she repaired a Vienna regulator she had been commissioned to restore for a family in McLean. Not prettily. He said it plainly, the way she had always talked to him. Wren kept working. She was silent for long enough that he thought she wasn't going to respond. Then she said, "My last serious relationship was with a man who thought my shop was a placeholder. He was an architect, kept saying I was wasting my training, that I could be doing something at scale." She fit a piece of the regulator's weight suspension into place with a small, satisfied click. "He was very confident about what I should want." "I'm not that," Lawson said. "No," she agreed. "But I spent a long time afterward being suspicious of men who seemed too interested, too fast. So when you kept coming back, part of me was waiting for the thing you actually wanted. I wanted to be somewhere I didn't have to perform." She looked at him over her shoulder. "I know," she said. "That's why I kept making the second cup." In February, the Tate Capital Annual Report cited a new philanthropic initiative, the Clement Street Education Fund, dedicated to public library programs in underserved neighborhoods in the Bay Area. The name did not appear in any press release. There was no announcement. Lawson's communications team asked twice if he wanted to publicize it. He said no. Ren read about it in a forwarded email from a childhood friend to San Francisco who worked at the branch. She called him. Did you name it after the library? Yes. A pause. You didn't tell me. I wasn't doing it for credit. Another pause. Longer. When she spoke, again her voice had something in it he had learned, over these months, to recognize. The sound of a wall coming down quietly, without drama, because it had decided on its own that it no longer needed to stand. Lawson. Yes. Come to the shop. He was there in 20 minutes. She was standing at the counter when he walked in, and she didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at him with those direct brown eyes that had never once pretended to find him more or less than he was. Then she reached under the counter and set something down between them. A pencil, plain yellow, number 2. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. I don't have a blank page, he said. You don't need one, she said. That's not the point. He understood. He had understood since October, probably. Since the first morning she had made a second cup of coffee without asking. Since the first afternoon she had explained the coaxial escapement with the patience of someone who believed her listener was worth the explaining. He reached across the counter. She took his hand. The shop ticked around them, patient and unhurried, keeping the same time it had kept for 40 years, since Ren's grandmother had first hung the brass placard above the door and opened the door and let the world inside, one careful repair at a time. Some things take 3 weeks, some things take longer, but if the work is done right, if you don't rush it, if you don't cut corners, if you're willing to stay until the thing is truly running the way it was built to run, then what comes out the other end isn't just fixed. It's better than before. Thank you for spending time with us today on Heart-Stirring Stories. If Lawson and Ren's story touched something in you, if it reminded you that some connections circle back around, no matter how many years stand between them, then we did what we set out to do. Hit the hype button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a story that matters. Leave us a comment and tell us which moment stayed with you. Until next time, keep your heart open. This is Heart-Stirring Stories.